I do a lot of open casting calls when I'm looking for something that I'm not finding, right away through the agencies, or even if I am, I'll just go out with an open casting call anyway. I'll release something on Actors Access. I just cast, I wish I could say right now, but I can't say yet, but I just cast a lead actress against an Oscar-winning A-list actor that I found her off of an open casting call on Instagram, and she submitted through Actors Access. This is a girl, from a reservation. This is definitely going to be life-changing.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. We have a phenomenal conversation that we have lined up for you with some wonderful panelists. Some of these are my heroes because they have done some marvelous work, and they are continuing to do, honestly, just some phenomenal and amazing work. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce some of these amazing guerreras in our industry. We have somebody who has, who we call the gem finder, who has worked on phenomenal historical movies like Stomp the Yard, Notorious, Fruitvale Station, and now a director and producer, Miss Tracy Twinkie Byrd. We have the maravillosa guerrera, who has worked on the multiple award-winning series like Narcos, an icon to the Latina community, like Gordita Chronicles. She's doing the new film that is coming out, Flaming Hot, which I'm very excited about because we all love our hot Cheetos. And really, truthfully, a titan when it comes to Latina representation, Miss Carla Hool.
Hi.
And then somebody who I adore, honestly, she's been doing some amazing work for our Indigenous and Native American communities and First Nations people. She has worked on the upcoming series that we're really excited to see, which I'm excited about, Resball, The Curse, and of course, the well-known series Reservation Dogs, Miss Angelique MidThunder.
Hi.
Hi there. And then, we have a mentor of mine who is our Vice President of Advocacy for the Casting Society, former executive over at Nickelodeon, and has worked on some wonderful projects like Warped, The Astronauts, and Blue's Clues and You, Miss Danielle Pretsfelder Demchick. All righty. Well, welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your time and for participating. Now, we have some hot topics that we're going to be talking about. And honestly, it's great to see you all here. You all have done marvelous work for our communities, and you continue to do the work. So on behalf of all the SAG-AFTRA and all performers, a big thank you to you. So let's get right to it. This is going to be like El Show de Laura, if you all remember, if you're watching. So, all right. So I really want to start with, because, we have somebody here who has contributed a lot to a specific community. And we all look up to Reuben Cannon, because Reuben Cannon really kind of set the path for us for these representations. But I remember even when I was a junior executive at ABC, we didn't have these many lists. Like when we do our lists and we're looking at, diverse talent, we weren't in the position that we are now. Now when we see we want a leading Black man or a leading Black lady, our lists are now tremendous and marvelous and fantastic. And we see representation on television and feature films in the mainstream media, and also filmmakers. And so thank you, Twinkie, for leading us away. And you are a gem finder. You have found some of the performers that we all love and appreciate today. But are we done doing the work?
No. No, we're not done.
So we see the statistics, we see that we're increasing and we're seeing the implementation of people, but why aren't we done? Why is the work?
Great question. Why aren't we done? Well, when you look at the projects that we are doing or that we're the leads of, at times, the reason why we're not done is because we're telling the story, or we're the lead in a story. Let's think Hidden Figures, because that's one of my favorites, because I actually read the book. When you're looking at and telling the story of Black, brown, indigenous, people of color, it's always white centered, meaning it's how we helped someone else, help them get to a place, and particularly how we were a part of this, but it's not actually our story. So the agency is not there. There are projects that are not necessarily our story. It's our story as to how we help them get to where they needed to go. So it's not we don't get the fullness. I'm looking forward to the fullness because I love learning. And if you're in a position to love learning and enjoy learning, you want to learn about cultures, you want to learn about cultural references, things that are important. I want to learn about so many things. I love traveling because of that. I love being from New York because of that, because we had everything. It's not a melting pot, it's a salad. Keep who you are. I don't need you to melt away to become an amalgam of one thing. I don't need you to not be who you are. I love you for who you are and what you bring to the table, and teach me to appreciate what it is and who it is that you are. So yes, we need more, and we need stories told from our point of view.
Exactly. Thank you. And a question to all of you, because you've all been doing this kind of work. How do you present your people, when we need diversity, when we need Latin people, when we need Black people, when we need Native American, Indigenous? How do you guys go about presenting these folks to the studios, the networks, the directors and producers? Have you encountered a situation where they weren't asking for diversity and you're like, excuse me, this is what we need? How do you go about that? How do you go about educating people about certain communities that they may not know about?
I always present the best choice for the role, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, ability. I don't really ask for permission. I just do that. And then if it's like, we weren't talking about fill in the blank for this role, is there a reason that we didn't see? I'm like, well, we didn't say that this was a cisgendered, able-bodied white woman, did we? And it's pretty hard, I find, to say that that's the only way you could see a role. But I can't present someone who's not great that way. Like, if they're a great actor, though, I see no reason I can't present you, as long as it's a role that you can realistically play. And there's very few things that somebody cannot play based off all the things I just named. I mean, people that have disabilities are bus drivers too. People that are, Native American are also professors. Like, what are you looking for that doesn't exist in these arenas? Very, very rare that there's anything you can actually highlight.
I also like to have conversations with my filmmakers before we get into the casting process. A lot of times, looking at the location where they're filming, talking to them about what the community looks like there. If they're, shooting in Los Angeles, New York, that is such a melting pot that maybe, people aren't as aware of all the different communities. If they're shooting in the Southwest, let's make sure to incorporate, the Latino heritage that is existing there, or the Native American, or, even the tricultural communities. So I always like to start, having those conversations before we even get into casting, and kind of give them a heads up that I'm going to be thinking outside of the box and presenting them with choices that maybe aren't scripted in a certain way. And I find they're more often than not, almost always receptive to that and enthusiastic for it, and kind of grateful that I'm like thinking ahead and, thinking creatively for them.
For my case, where I cast a lot of Latin projects, I think there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to educating people about the diversity within the Latin community. The way I start, of course, is educating, producers and letting them know the differences that exist within our community, because it is so diverse. so very diverse, and it encompasses so many countries that it's really hard sometimes to explain why someone, even with agents, like they will pitch someone. I'm like, this person is not right. Oh, but the parent is from here. Yes, but there are so many nuances when it comes to casting Latinx. I think that it's mostly educating people, I think.
Sometimes you encounter some resistance, though. Sometimes there is like people they don't understand. Carla, we've had conversations about like, listen, like the family is Puerto Rican. The person needs to be, not saying that they have to be from Puerto Rico, but they need to have the accent. You can't have somebody with a Colombian or a Castellano accent, doing this. So how do you go about that conversation when you meet that resistance?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, first of all, in order to cast something, you need to know about what you're casting, what community you're casting. You need to be knowledgeable and educate yourself. So if you're casting like in the Latinx world, you need to know the accents and the differences, right? Which are many, and every country has different types of people, and the Latinx community is also not an ethnicity. No, sorry, it is an ethnicity. It's not a race. So that is something that also getting out of all those stereotypes.
That.
Yeah, it's very complicated. It's very complex. It's not.
I get to see a Black Honduran Latino in a project and that one of my best friends is from Honduras and he's Black. And I'm telling you, he has never played himself, not yet, ever.
Yes.
As Alonzo has never played himself. He is Black Cuban. He has never played himself ever. He's only spoken Spanish, I think, once, and that was in a Fast and Furious.
Yep.
I think. And who's doing Primo?
Well, also Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
I'm doing Primo.
Oh, Christina Vidal, a Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's precisely what you were talking about. And which is also something with the pandemic, everything kind of went to extremes where, well, you can't cast a Mexican to play a Puerto Rican. I don't agree with that. I think we need to try to stick to authenticity. Yes. And if we can find a Mexican to play a Mexican, we should. But if there is someone who's Honduran or a Colombian that plays that role, and it's a better actor and better suited for that role and can play it properly, authentically, can look the part and do the accent, I'm completely open to that. Right?
So piggyback off on that, we do a lot of authentic casting. All of us here, we this is like our specialty. This is what we master. Angelique and I have worked on, obviously Angelique is like the godmother for a lot of the Native American, films and stuff, but authenticity is important. Why is it important? Like, why is the authentic storytelling and the authentic performers important for story making?
Well, I would say that if you turn that around and say, why is it important for us to cast a British role with an actor that speaks British? Right? Why is that? Nobody asks that, but nobody questions, nobody dares cast an American actor to play a British role speaking American.
We did. To play a British role speaking. We just watched an American actress play a British role but not an American role in a British show speaking American. Wait, say that again? Yeah, we just watched an American actress, speaking with a British accent, so much so that she fooled everybody in Queen Charlotte.
Oh no, but that's okay. Exactly. But you're not going to see someone cast an American actress to play a British role speaking American. You know what I mean?
Or vice versa. You were not going to hire somebody that's an Irish actor.
An Irish cast.
Play American with an Irish accent.
Exactly. But you see that happen a lot within the Latin world. You know, you will see shows where the role is supposed to be Mexican and they can barely speak Spanish, or the role is supposed to be Puerto Rican and they speak with a Mexican accent. And it's like, what? But that never happens in you know, with the white roles, with the American and you know, those roles, we don't see that happen.
Exactly. And so to all the performers here, so like I actually had the honor of writing an article for Miss Carla Hool for the Casting Society, and we dissected this, where yes, there was a time where we were like, we cannot hire a Puerto Rican with a Puerto Rican accent to play a Mexican. We're not saying, however, that we can't hire somebody of another country to do this, but you must know the accent. You must master the accent. And the reason why I asked the question of authenticity is that there is a tremendous respect owed to the culture that we are telling the story of and the peoples that we are representing. So it is the respect that we owe to the culture. So if it's a show about Mexicans, you know, do a deep dive into that culture. If we're doing, you know, a show about Northern Cheyenne people, do a deep dive into that. You know, if we're doing a show about
doing snowfall,
Afro-Latinos,
Idris, do a deep dive.
Yeah, do a deep dive, master the accent and understand that culture. We have to do what we have to do to cast however we can. And yes, a lot of the times we are asked to cast authentically because there may be a lived experience that is owed, you know, like there is the trans experience that there needs to be showcased. You know, there is the Native American people who don't get often a chance to portray themselves. So, so we owe them, you know, this space, but there is definitely a respect and an experience owed to that culture. So thank you, ladies. Let's moving right on. Now, I think that a lot of,
Can I just quickly, just to your point, I think, you know, it's so important. Like, I think we don't realize that, you know, what we're doing here is we're not just like watching television or, you know, watching movies. It's like what we do affects people deeply. And so when people aren't being represented authentically, whether they're, you know, Mexican or Native American from specific tribes, or where they're from, you know, Cuba or wherever they're from, if it's not being done authentically, it feels almost like harmful to that community, because those communities are watching these shows and they're enthusiastic to see themselves portrayed. But then when they're portrayed incorrectly, it's like, do they feel invisible? Do they feel not good enough or not seen? So I think that for me personally, that's why I feel like we owe it to whoever we're portraying, whoever we're casting to portray certain communities, to do it right, because it's deep, it runs deep.
And it perpetuates the notion that you don't have a place in this industry and that you won't work. That if we can't, that we're not even trying to, you know, we're telling your story, but you're not there. It's like it double invisibles you.
Yes, it does. We have a lot of that in the African-American, Black, Moor community of British actors playing African-Americans, and specifically, and how it is that we're portrayed. And it's a very interesting and really challenging conversation. Because some people do say, well, I just want to cast the best person for the role, but have you seen everybody? Is the question. Like, to say, I just want to cast the best person for the role and you haven't seen everybody, if you haven't looked in theater, if you haven't paid attention to, well, just the Black person that you've seen splashed on Variety or Deadline every week, like, is that where and what's happening? So we have a lot of challenges, and within our community, there are a lot of different layers and textures. We have, you know, Caribbeans, Jamaicans, and Caribbeans that are portraying that can only play African American, but can't play who they are. Like, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of layers.
And then when there's an opportunity to cast for within those communities, and when it's not done, that is when the error is being done.
Yeah.
You know, when we have a film that is going to portray finally an Afro-Latino, you know, somebody that is Indigenous, somebody that is Zapotec, somebody that has a disability, we have a huge responsibility to be able to showcase that those people exist, because they do. And I'm sure that many people that are in SAG right now, many performers may still be feeling like, I don't feel that I could be a leading lady or a leading man because I'm I have a disability. I have I have a darker, deep, darker skin tone as an Afro Latino. Yes, Danielle.
That's what we're going for. Richly melanated, dark skin.
Richly melanated, exactly.
Skin is white skin, and that is not the default skin. So we are richly melanated. Yes, continue.
Richly melanated, yes. And so, but they feel that they can't be a leading person, because of the texture of my hair, because of whichever. And that's what we are combating. And so we're trying really hard to see that, to showcase that, some people exist, because they do. That's our world. So really quickly, I want to get into this really quickly because I do think it's important. How do we find the appropriate terms or the current terms for some of the representations of our communities? I think that some people don't know what to say, like people don't know how to use pronouns or how to ask for pronouns. Is it African American or Black? Do we say Indigenous or do we say Native American or First Nations? So can you guys get into a little bit about that? How can people educate themselves on terminologies?
I mean, I think a lot of it's personal, and I'm speaking more to disability, but it's, people identify as what they identify as, and you really have to ask somebody before you can assume that they want to be called disabled even. A lot of people that are deaf do not consider themselves disabled, for example. Some people do consider themselves deaf and disabled. Other people, when they talk about a limb, if they lost a limb, whether it's congenital versus it's an acquired disability, like there's a lot of different nuances. And I think it's okay to talk to somebody about how they identify. When you're putting a breakdown out, of course, it's a little bit different and you can't, ask every actor before they submit. But there are definitely terms that are more universally okay to use. And if you are talking about disability, disabled is more appropriate these days than some words that were, used in the past. I think that's sort of the trend. Same with when we're talking about health at every size. People don't really want to be called plus size. A lot of people say body inclusive or fat. Like you kind of need to go to these resources that exist to get the wording that's the most universally inclusive. But it's important to remember that identity is personal and it's never going to be an umbrella.
Ooh, I would say for our community, one of the challenges that we have had and that we still have is constantly being named. Since we were, kidnapped and sex trafficked to this country, we have constantly been named. This country in particularly, but colonized all around the world. We have been given a name. So we are still working within our culture to find the name that who it is that we really are. We're at an awakening time right now. We're excavating a lot of truths and also shedding a lot of untruths. So yes, the universal term would be Black, or for those that are in this community, African American, that are living in this particular country. But we're getting to our nation. We're focused on, at least I know that I am focused on what my nation is and being called my nationality.
I would say in my community, the Latina community, there is always the doubt whether to call people Latina or Hispanic, right? And I think it's, the definition is Latin is anyone, it's a short for Latin American. So it's anyone that comes from Latin America. So that's Mexico all the way down to Argentina, right? Including Brazilians are Latin. And Hispanic is anyone who comes from any Spanish-speaking country. So that would include Spain. Like a Brazilian will not be a Hispanic, but they'll be a Latin America. And a Spaniard will be Hispanic, but not Latin, right? So I think there's many times that confusion with the Latin and the Hispanic terms. And Latina or Latinx are the new terms that, as we know, so that we don't do Latina or Latino.
It's more gender inclusive. Well, even though there's a lot of backlash with that, but
yeah, it's confusing. Now, is it Latinx or Latina?
Latinx, right. And just everybody
Just
knows.
Latin.
Right. Latinx was kind of created, but I think that there was a bigger backlash with Latinx because we don't use the X's in that form, in the Spanish language. So then the Latina community came back with Latina, which made more sense to us when we speak. But of course, there are people that are really angry at that. But it's like, I'm sorry. Our history kind of shows that we were gender inclusive before we were taken over by the Spaniards. So I'm just going to drop that little note there. Angelique, I know that you wanted to speak as well.
Yes. Well, first of all, it's like, it's so confusing for me because I live in Santa Fe and it's like very like here they say Hispanic, they say Latino. I just worked with a Brazilian producer who was like, Angelique, it's Latino. Like that's where he's from. So I'm like, okay. So it's, it's very confusing for, I think we all just have to be open to continuing to learn and go with the flow because I feel like we're still navigating. But as far as the, indigenous population goes, it kind of, it is also kind of broad. Indigenous are people who, covers indigenous people all over the world, where they are indigenous to get more specific. First Nations is Canada, Native American is North American indigenous. And then, if you talk to people kind of like Twinkie was saying, specific to their nations, if you're talking to Navajo, they like to be considered Navajo. And then even their own way of calling themselves is Dene. So it gets more and more specific. But yeah, again, I think even for, the indigenous communities, it's still being navigated because obviously we can't all be expected to learn over 500 indigenous nations across North America and refer to people by their individual nations. So it's just, I think it's just still like, I feel like we're just in the, in the middle of this journey right now, all of us together and having these conversations.
Exactly. And there's a lot of education that we owe as filmmakers, but also as, for the performers and for the actors that are watching this. There's a lot of, again, research and education. And then with this terminology, to respect the terminology. Like, for example, I think a lot of people don't know the term two-spirit, which is the broader term for, a third gender within the Native American and First Nations communities. And then within that, and that's only a broad term because we have other terms like we have Wintes, we have Nadleje, and it goes on and on and on. But two-spirit is a broader term. However, it is exclusive to the Native American and First Nations community. So I myself, as a Latino Indigenous person, I don't use the term two-spirit because it is not for us. It's not for our community. However, as a Latino Indigenous person, I had a couple of elders talk to me. John Sneezy, may he rest in peace, said that, you should look into your community because you do have third genders in your community. And so I did a deep dive. And so the term for us in the Zapotec in Oaxaca, the third gender is muches. And that was a term that I now have embraced, and that's what I use. So I am a proud muche because that is the term that we use. So there's a respect owned to terminology as well that I encourage everyone to look into when you're educating yourselves into this.
Yeah, I would say that, the important thing is for us as casting directors that whatever project we take on, we educate ourselves because it is very complex. It is very complex and it's hard to know all these different terminologies and everything, but be responsible with what we're casting and respectful to that community. That's the most important thing. Because I think some people just go and cast and don't care and don't do any kind of, they don't care for authenticity.
No, they don't.
Exactly. So that's, and when you see, I see so many things in some in the Latin casting that is like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And it's just, we need to be respectful. So if we're going to cast something, really educate ourselves. I think.
Thankfully, moving into producing.
And producers,
I had
the
to
whole
get
industry.
I had to get out of it. But let me tell you, these directors, some of them are lulled into complacency and they think they know every ethnicity better than we know ourselves because they watched an episode of God only knows what. I know Black people because I watched an episode of Snowfall. I'm like, yeah, no, you don't. And Snowfall is not all Black people. So, and that happens in every community, the directors and the producers. It's a conversation we're dealing with, and we live in a country where people don't even want education. They don't even want to read books right now. It's not just Florida. So that's the fight right there. That's the fight. It's getting people to educate themselves when they're so used to being centered and they know everything. Good luck. Good luck. But the directors keep hiring them. Why? Because they make them feel safe. Good luck.
I want to shift gears a little bit more for the actors, but before we go into the next question, one of the things I like to encourage my actors is, like, for example, there's this big talk about, and I'm sure that Angelique gets this too, but I am Latino Indigenous, but there's a Native American role. Can I submit to it? Should I, etc. Sometimes we're like, of course we're open to everything, but we are trying our best to cast as authentically as possible because it is important to that community. However, if you're going to do that, I always say, then research the culture. You cannot just show up and say, I have long hair, and I have a Sabotec or I'm Kashkan or Tlashkatlek or whichever. Fine, yes, of course you are. You're indigenous to the Latin American lands. However, if it's a story about Northern Cheyenne people, I expect you to do the research on Northern Cheyenne people. If it's Cherokee or if it's Navajo or whichever, do your research. And that goes for every single character that you are submitting yourself for. Do the research on that community and that particular group, because it is important. It is absolutely imperative for you to do that.
Incredibly.
So
Caribbean. It's like, oh, you can't, if it's Jamaican, you can't throw a Trinidadian in there and think that, oh, well, it sounds the same to me. No, it's not the same. Like, get in there. And if you're uncomfortable, good, but get in there.
Exactly. We have Dominicanos, we sometimes we have to do a little mishmash. We have to, I'm looking for Puerto Rican, but I'm going to look in Dominicanos and I'm going to look at Cubanos, but I know the difference in the accent. So as an actor, then if you are from the Dominican Republic, master the Cuban accent, master the Dominican accent, master those accents around there, because more than likely you could play that. If you are from El Salvador, people from Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua sound different. It's subtle, but it's different. But why not master it? Why not master all of those things?
Even within a country, there are different accents.
1,000%.
US,
Within New York, there are different accents. Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, the Bronx.
Exactly. And usually, actors do the research and prepare themselves to play the role as is. He's playing a man from Boston. So they have to do that accent. They do the research. They prepare themselves. The same respect and authenticity needs to go to all the minority, to all the diversity communities.
Exactly. Okay, so a question that is really interesting that I wanted to really ask everyone. So with our authentic castings and looking, we do research. I'm not gonna lie, I go on people's Instagrams and everything, and I'm checking because maybe I'm looking for somebody that is trans or non-binary or queer or Native American, whichever. I'm trying to verify as much as possible. So, but people work differently. So a lot of actors are questioning, should I put that out? Because we see it on their bios or they're posting like, proud Cubana, Dine, trans, queer, whichever. Do you guys recommend actors to do this, to be disclosing their identities? I know it's going to be a different answer for everybody, but what do you guys think about that?
I personally find it extremely helpful. I do a lot of casting outside of just talent agencies. I do a lot of open calls and searches. And I mean, I feel like that's a double-edged sword. I think, if you're trying to portray something, or you want to be considered for a lot of different things, it's maybe not great for you to put yourself in a box. But also, like, I mean, as a casting director, I find it very helpful because and it's because I'm wanting to do right by the community that I'm representing. So if I'm looking for people of certain tribes, or if I am looking for somebody, who's from like, I'm just trying to be as specific as possible. When we're talking about casting somebody who's a queer character too, I mean, I want to do that right. And I'm always looking for that, those authentic people to present. So I appreciate it, but I do also see how it could potentially, go the other way for people.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I do have to say something. I would ask also for actors to be responsible with what they write there, because I see many times, like for Spanish, Mexico City. Have you seen that? Yeah.
Yes.
And don't put Mexico City if you don't really do that accent. I mean, I think it's personal and it's everyone's own personal decision to put whatever they want to put in their resumes. But if you put something, just be sure you can do it, right? Don't. It's like when I moved here 16 years ago, people didn't know I was Latina, I was Mexican, right? So I would ask actors, do you speak Spanish? And they would say, yes, of course. And they didn't know me. So they would say, yes, of course. So I would immediately switch into Spanish and they would freak out and be like, oh, no, just poquito. I'm like, don't tell me you speak Spanish if you don't speak Spanish, right? Because they thought that I was white, I was American, and I wouldn't hear the difference. I wouldn't know. So I think that's very, very important. So as responsible as we need to be as casting directors, also actors need to be responsible with what they say they can play. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I had like one of the most frustrating things where I was casting. This was before really like the push for authenticity. And I was fighting for a role that signed to be played by a deaf actor. And at that point, I was being told, this was, like 8 years ago at this point, like, oh, we just need someone who signs. So I was like, okay, I'm going to see both, just to like appeal to both, make sure the producers felt heard. But we ended up casting a deaf actor. I won the battle, whatever. But the point was not that I was going through people's resumes and all these people said ASL knowledge on their resume. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so funny. I've been seeing you for so many years. I had no idea that you signed. Like how, like, where did, I needed them to sign in the audition. And it was like, oh, I can't do that. I'm like, well, then why is it on your resume? And like, if you're saying you can sign, also that's deaf culture, that's a culture. And if you're going to be submitting for roles where the role is, their first language is ASL, you shouldn't really be submitting for that if your first language is an ASL, just from a cultural standpoint, which is a whole other thing. But, I can't bring you in for that. So it should not be on your resume. I mean, I don't sign very well, but, someone who is in the room obviously could, just like how Carla's saying, like, if she just starts speaking Spanish to you, if you can't, speak it back, like, that shouldn't be on your resume.
Yeah. But that just goes, I tell my actors on all the classes that I teach with the SAG Foundation, it's like, don't lie on your resume. Don't lie on your resume, because there have been horror stories and just basics, not just languages, but it's like horseback riding. Somebody fell off a horse on the first day of shooting and broke both of his arms. And I had to recast like at 3:00 in the morning, or doing a big show where you have to do a dance sequence, and one of our executive producers is Jennifer Lopez, and she's going to be sitting in there, and then suddenly the girls are crying because they're like, oh, I told you I could dance, because they literally said I do 8 years of this and this, but really they just did a Zumba class, and that's not dance, So it's like, so just don't do it, especially when it comes to cultural things like this. I know that you guys want a job, but there's obviously a big respect to the cultures and the communities here as well. But there's this also thing I will say, there's a wonderful word called knowledgeable, and you never know how far that's going to get you. if you're knowledgeable in a culture, if you're knowledgeable in accent. Maybe we're looking for somebody with a Oaxacan accent. It's like, you know what? I'm knowledgeable in that region or whichever, you never know how far that term could get you, so there's that. There's a really good question here. How should I go about doing the research when there is little to none given? If there is a community or something that there's not much on, or you can't really find something, truthfully, just ask. So I'm a huge advocate for, like, if you don't know, call your peers, call people, hey, do you know what this is? Da, 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 da. I do it all the time. As a casting professional, the first time I ever was given a Native American, a project to do, I called Angelique, I called you and I was like, listen, this is what I got, can you please help out? And she was very nice and walked me through it, and then I went to the organizations, I went to the tribes, I talked to people, I talked to a professor, and I educated myself. It wasn't like I had a cheat sheet and there it is. It took time to research. Just like how I found out about my Muche roots, I had to go back and do that. So just ask around and somebody is going to know, and somebody is going to at least be able to point you at the right direction. Also,
whoever that asked that question, they're gonna have to get uncomfortable. And it sounds like they're not used to getting uncomfortable. So welcome to getting uncomfortable. Have a seat.
But that's actually a really good point, Twinkie, isn't it? I feel that, honestly, I think that sometimes we may be casting into something that's very specific or very, I don't want to say controversial, but just very sensitive. Guys, you could ask us. Ask the casting office. Ask us, the casting directors, the associates, the assistants, because more than likely, we are doing the research ourselves. We are doing the research. We are either working with a consultant or we are the consultants, and it's a whole different conversation because we probably shouldn't. But we are more than likely doing that research. So just ask us. Don't be afraid to have your reps call, your managers call. You could email us. You could email me directly. I don't want to speak for all the other casting directors in this room, but always just ask.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a lot of, with the technology today, we see actors creating their own content, or in the independent world, we see the content created. People, I think, are just saying, you know what, I'm just going to write it for myself, or I'm going to go search for it. So do you think it's helpful when actors do this, when they're creating their own content, when they're writing their scripts, when they're directing, they want to produce? What do you guys think about that?
I love it.
Yeah, me too.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I first of all, they're creative, so they need to get their creative juices out and to keep creating. It gives them an incredible appreciation. I direct as well as produce. My brother is also here visiting, and he's a director and a co-executive producer on Yellow Jackets. And watching what people create, what these actors and these couples and these friends come together and create, it gives them a whole new respect for directors, for the crew, for their actual, the frame, the lighting, storytelling, and everything, the music. It gives them an appreciation for all of it, and they may very well be the next Sally Richardson Whitfield and go from actress to director and kill it. Like, she's killing it right now, which is awesome. So yeah, I love it. And I love watching what they're doing. And they have grown a community so much so. What is the sister's name? Danielle Pretsfelder. She's on Ghost. She's now made the 101 mark. She's very, very excited. She's on Ghost on CBS. I started following her 2 years ago, or at the beginning of the pandemic. She and her best friend were doing all these like skits about what it's like to be a Black actor in Hollywood. And it was so true. They even had me on. It was, some of the stuff was so, they're creative. Sorry, I don't mean to take over. Just I love it.
And who better to tell our stories than ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
I always tell people work begets work. The more you're working, the more you're creating, the more I can see of you. Also a lot of it is like the show, not tell. Like, I do think it's nice to see things on someone's social media, but if I can see, footage of you signing and doing, if I can see footage of you speaking the language that this role in, whatever it is, or see footage of you dancing, if it's, don't just say you can dance, like I want to see it. So the more of that on your social media, the better.
Mm-hmm. And the content could be as simple as a TikTok video or whichever to a full-blown short film, and the thing is that there are so many initiatives out there now. We have, Lalif does a lot of stuff with Amazon now and with Netflix for inclusion programs. AFI teams up with Disney's Launchpad. There's a Launchpad series for Disney. There's so many things out there, that you could do to tell your own story. As Angelique says, who better than ourselves to tell the story? And the truth is, guys, we could only do so much as casting people. We need directors, we need producers, we need executives that are Latina, that are Indigenous, that are Black, to understand the struggles that we go through, because there's only so much that we could do, and I could only yell so loud at times, but when the studio doesn't hear it, they don't hear it, and so
Maybe our next boss. You may be our next Issa Rae. You may be the person that then hires us. And, you started on Instagram and on TikTok, and now you're the executive producer of that same show you started on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The creators of Reservation Dogs, which has been a groundbreaking television show for Indigenous content and creatives, was started with a YouTube group, the 1491s, and they were doing YouTube back in the day before YouTube was what it is now. And now they have a TV show. They're all producers on it. They're all writers on it, the showrunners. So yeah, like just getting that creative out and telling your story in a way that only you can tell it, I think is, extremely valuable, because there's an audience for it. We all have a craving for authentic stories.
Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. And one thing that we don't really talk about, and it's a kind of a sensitive subject, but at least in my experience of doing some of these specialty castings, is that a lot of these communities struggle to get into the business, whether it's because they financially cannot afford to have this career. A lot of them don't. Taking headshots is crazy. Transportation, travel, joining the union, taking classes, because let's be super real here. A lot of these communities never thought that being an actor or being in the business is even a career, or they were made to believe that this is not a career, right? Or some of them want to get into it, and we find people, sometimes we're out there and we're looking, and we find some people with potential. We're doing the Big Mi Gente search, right, with CSA. We found marvelous talent, and we also found talent that's like somebody in the middle of Bolivia who is attempting to be an actor, but they don't have an acting school near them. What do you have to say to these people that want to get into it and just feel that they can't? How do they gain access to us? How do they start their careers?
I mean, I think it's becoming more and more accessible. With this era of self-taping, I mean, it can potentially be as simple as taping with your cell phone and submitting, keeping your eye on, like I do a lot of open casting calls when I'm looking for something that I'm not finding, right away through the agencies, or even if I am, I'll just go out with an open casting call anyway. I'll release something on Actors Access. So these are, there are free resources, between that and working with your cell phone. I mean, I wish I could say right now, but I can't say yet, but I just cast a lead actress against an Oscar-winning A-list actor that I found her off of an open casting call on Instagram, and she submitted through Actors Access. She doesn't have a lick of, experience. She's just a natural. She did her self-tape with her cell phone, with no one to help her. And, and this is going to be life-changing. This is a girl, from a reservation. This is definitely going to be life-changing, So I feel like it's of course, it's fairly rare that these things happen, but they do happen. And any actor has to go to hundreds of auditions anyway. So, I think just getting out there and doing it with your cell phone and with social media and signing up for all of the free Actors Access casting, networks, anywhere that there are breakdowns being released, I think, hopefully that makes it accessible to everybody on a larger, even global scale.
1,000%. And that's when it's so special, isn't it? That's when we love our jobs.
Mhm.
When we see that we change someone's life. That's a perfect example, Angelique. Carla, like the
That's
story
the best.
Carla,
Literally
like the story
cry.
with Coco, and how you change that person's life. Twinkie, like you have so many stories. I mean, you are a gem finder. A lot of those people still go
And
out.
I am, and it's great. But also to your point, or to the question, first you have to know and understand that there are a lot of things that were designed. So taking music out of our schools, taking theater out of our schools, the public school system, what's happening now, there is a design for that. So part of that design then keeps theater and drama and art and imagination from our young people, especially in our communities, in communities of color. And what then happens is that it's a snowball effect, right? So what then happens is our young people are marginalized, and then there's a whole other group of people who may have that in their schools, and they may do, and then it's like, well, that's the best. So we have to really do what we're doing, which is sifting through. We also have to figure out, for what I do, casting and producing and directing, what I do is always refer books and resources that are free on YouTube, links that they can look up and look towards, theater companies that will accept and bring in a large number of young people, or people, period, from and in the community. It's important for us to have a list of resources and to share them. I share them in a bounce back email. Literally, if you email asktwinkiebyrd@gmail.com, what will bounce back to you is all of my list of books you should be reading, how you should be growing yourself, the types of theater and things that you should be watching, because it's not just, I don't want you, I love finding those people, but I also don't want it to be a one-off. I want you to have a career. And that's important to me. So for me, I understand what's happening in our community, and I also want to offset it as much as possible, because we're under attack creatively, and we need to be clear about that.
Absolutely. Here's a question from a performer. I look biracial, but I am very much Black. I once had a casting director tell me they liked my reel, but I don't fit the role, which is clearly for a Black American. Should I apply for roles I look like over the roles I actually fit?
I
think both. I think both. That's my opinion. I think, it happens a lot in the Latinx community, where in the Latinx community, we have all races, we have Black Latinos, we have Asian Latinos, we have white Latinos, we have Indigenous Latinos. And a lot of them don't get included within our community because people, they don't fit that stereotype, and they don't get cast, like a manager just recently sent me a great actress, a Latin American actress, and she's Asian. And I'm like, how hard is it going to be to sell her here? Nobody's going to want to cast her because she does not look how she's supposed to look, right? So I would say, yes, submit yourself for what you are and for what you look like.
And amplify it. Amplify what you are, because, we all come from different little regions. Some people could be like, I am Tlaxcalan, Mexican, Salvadoran, and a trans woman. like also a witch. So it's like I have all these little things that if I was an actor, I've actually acted in a few things because I am a witch. And so like, do you want to be like the supreme for this play? It's like, yeah. So just like amplify it. So if you have, I'm a quarter Japanese and they're looking for Japanese people, do it and amplify that. I am actually a quarter Japanese. You know, I can't tell you how many actors have reached out. Like, I actually know a little bit of this. Should I? Of course. Do it, because more than likely that little ounce that you are is going to get you in. You know, and we want to know those things. A skill asset, you know, something, a language, an accent, a dialect, whichever it is, amplify that if it makes sense to the world.
What is crazy, I have to say, is you know, I've had cases where I bring in an actress, like a Mexican actress, and the producers will be like, she doesn't look Latina enough. I'm like, what do you mean? She's Latina. She's Mexican. How more Latin can she be, right? If she is Mexican, or oh, she doesn't sound, well, no, I mean, and it happens so much, it's crazy.
I've had it happen.
It really is crazy.
A Mexican director told me that a Mexican girl didn't look Mexican enough.
Yep.
No, yeah.
I think
It doesn't look this what.
And he was blonde haired and blue eyed.
Yeah, no.
And you have to, and actors, like, you have to be patient, take a breath when this happens, you know, because the truth is, you know, I've been in really uncomfortable situations where I had to talk to somebody who was full blown Latina, a certain race, because I don't want to say who it is and stuff, because it was very sensitive, but I had a certain executive tell me that they're not this enough. I'm like, what are you talking about? They are 100% from that country.
Yeah, they've told me you're not Mexican enough. Oh, what? I was born and raised. I'm more Mexican than Chile.
This particular actress is lightly melanated, like myself, or even lighter. And they were trying to match with a richly melanated family. That may be the concern. But I can say this to you, sis. Don't hold in and keep what was said to you. You've got to release that, because that's their opinion. And in their opinion, let it go. That you've got to keep doing what you need to do for yourself as an actress. And just like everyone has just said here, like, submit for what you look like and what you are, and keep going. That was one job, one person, and it's gone. Next. It may not have anything to do with you. It had everything to do with maybe matching up the complexions of a family. That's all.
And it's an opinion, you know, like, you know who you are.
Honest about who you are is very helpful for us to understand who you are and where we can fit you in.
Beautifully worded, beautifully worded. Wow. Well, this has been amazing. We could go on for hours and hours and hours, but this was a great start, listening to my heroes. Honestly, you guys, each of you have done tremendous, tremendous work, and I appreciate every single one of you. I have the pleasure of working under Danielle, under CSA, and learned so much about advocacy and diversity. So thank you, sweetheart, for being here. Carla, Twinkie, Angelique, I appreciate you all. My final words to everybody here is this country is going through such crazy times right now, and a lot of our communities are under attack. So I implore you to love each other, support each other, listen to each other, because there have been so many cases of actors feeling under attack. Obviously, call the union, call SAG and say that something's happening, but oftentimes we rely on each other. I just sent Angelique a video about somebody who felt under attack, you know, on set, and she felt disappointed that she couldn't rely on her brothers and sisters. So watch out for each other, love each other, and continue to inspire each other, because yes, we're entertainers. Yes, we're in the entertainment business. We're casting people, we're actors, but we have a very unique and eclectic responsibility, because we inspire people. To that little girl who thought that she wasn't pretty enough because she's richly melanated, because she has textured hair, you know, to the person on the reservation, to the Latino person who was in Eastern Oregon like myself, to the person that's on a wheelchair who thinks that they're not being seen, it matters. So keep inspiring, keep loving, and keep supporting each other. And thank you so much for being here. Much kisses to you all. Twinkie, Carla, Danielle, and Angelique, thank you for your work, and we'll see each other very soon.